Hi.
Hi, Rory.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Oh, puppies.
Well, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, it's your meeting.
I don't think we have everybody, do we? I see Paul, but he's the only other one I see so far.
Yeah, you're right. We don't have everybody here.
Slackers.
Just the important ones.
I mean, I do have to agree with you, Paul.
Well, there's Dustin, so
Dustin.
you got three.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Are we
Hi,
okay to
Dustin.
get started with three?
Oh, that's right.
I don't
Heidi,
see
it's the mayor.
Roger yet, right? Roger Timmerman.
I see Lori Harvey on the call. That's
That's all we need. We got Laurie.
pleasant surprise.
So we're good. We got Laurie and Kim.
Yeah, I texted
Oh,
him
yeah.
earlier and he said 6 o'clock. So I can't believe he's late.
Dustin, you switched up your area.
Yeah, I've been house sitting for the past 2 weeks or so, so I'm not actually at home.
Oh, nice.
That's not a picture, right? That's not a background. That's real.
That was real.
That's a real plant,
Kind of never know with Dustin what you're going to get.
right? I know.
We'll see how the night goes.
Just be gentle, all right? Take it easy on the new kid, Dustin.
I forgot you were mayor tonight.
Oh, well, at least somebody did, because I sure didn't.
No, I can go over some of the financial highlights if you want to start with that while we're waiting for Roger.
Roger just said he was joining right now. So he should be here like weather. But you can start, Lori, if you want to start.
Let's see.
Oh, there he goes.
Oh, there he is. Hi, Roger.
Oh, well, so we got the big three from Utopia here. Looks like we're only missing Councilmember Brown.
Nope, Brown's here. I don't see Quinn though. I don't.
Oh,
see
there he is. I got him.
Barry.
Thanks,
All right.
Okay, Mayor, Madam Pro Tem, it's all yours.
Okay, I guess we're gonna go ahead and open the meeting, and I'm gonna turn it over to Kane for the Utopia update.
Thanks, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. We told the City Council we would have an update tonight from Utopia on where we're at, both financially and with the building the project out in the cities. And so we're pleased to have with us tonight Roger Timmerman, Executive Director, Laurie Harvey, who's the Chief Financial Officer and Deputy Executive Director, and Kim McKinley, who's our Marketing Director for Utopia. So I will turn the time over to Roger and let you start in your presentation.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen here so we go through a little PowerPoint. Love PowerPoints, right? Feel free to interrupt me. I like casual conversation, but I've got some materials to get through as well. So I'll just jump in. I'll cover some of the history just briefly. For those that may want an update, I think the context is also important. So Utopia, we're interlocal, and Midvale is one of those founding members and has been with us all the way. We were in the very beginning, and then as we bonded for projects back in 2004, you're part of that. That was a tough time. We've had some better years since then, and you've been part of that. So you're also a UIA city. But among the founding members, we have these 11 cities, and then you may have heard that we've had some newer, more recent partnerships with cities, which would include Woodland Hills, Idaho Falls, Morgan, West Point, Clearfield, and And there's several other cities looking to do partnerships with us. Our backbone or our network kind of covers this area of Utah. Mostly the big blue areas are where we have fiber to the home throughout a city, but we have these backbone routes and things that interconnect and provide services across the state. This is the timing of things. So I picked colors intentionally here. We had some difficult years in red. We've had some good years in green, and the green years basically represents phase 2 of Utopia. UIA was created as a separate interlocal entity, and it's kind of this phase 2 of Utopia. But it's been financing and expanding the system, and it's been doing that very successfully. Utopia has, none of the new bonds and none of the growth were under Utopia, but we kind of have both of those working together. We call them collectively Utopia Fiber, but there are 2 separate agencies, and Midvale is part of both of those. We have our offerings. So what we do, we obviously build fiber networks out there, and customers generally will pay us this $30 a month, and then they pick a service provider, and that results in a service that's $65 a month for 250 meg, or 78 per gig, or we even have 10 gig options now. So when we got started with this, it was we were talking about 10 meg and 50 meg and 100 meg was the original offerings on Utopia. So things have come along quite a ways, where things are much better and upgraded, and demands increased as well. We only had a couple providers back in the early days, and we continue to add. In fact, I think last time we met with you, we're probably at 10 or 11, and now we're up to 13 different providers on the residential side, and 25 to 30 or so on the business side of things. And so not only are we getting more customers, but we're attracting more providers and more competition to the system. And why do we do this? This has changed as well over time. So when we started this back in 2002 and bonded for the second project, or the first build out in 2004, we're talking about email attachments and upgrading from dial-up, things like that. Back then, you didn't have YouTube or Netflix. We weren't talking about Zoom. Remote education, those weren't even part of the argument. We knew things were coming, and the need was there, but obviously we didn't see it like we do now. Now we've gone from getting something better than dial-up to something that would support streaming and media and entertainment services, and that was the primary driver for many years. And in the recent history, it's changed from that to where the primary function of broadband and fiber is to support education and to support work and telehealth and smart city applications. These things, this is the reason why we do this, and it's a critical function. And you think about how much we need that, and how important that is to make sure that we're not at a disadvantage. We need good broadband connectivity. So obviously that's all good, because that does drive more subscriptions and revenues on the system as things adapt, and that becomes more critical in our lives. But our motivations are different too. I did want to touch briefly on some things we've done on the smart city space. We could talk for a long time in smart city, but I wanted to point out a couple of cool things. There's a lot of things we could talk about with like smart irrigation and city parks and things like that. But a couple of things I wanted to bring up particular attention to. One was this air quality monitoring network that we put in place. And so this map here shows an image that has the actual air sensors across the Salt Lake Valley. And you'll notice there's not a whole lot of them in a lot of the valley, but if you look at Murray and Midvale, there's a really high density of those. We have these in every neighborhood, and that's because of the ones that Utopia installed. There's a lot of them out there that aren't Utopia sensors, but Utopia is the #1 provider of air quality sensors in the state. And whenever we have a cabinet or a hut, it's now automatic that we'll go out there and put one of these air quality sensors, because we want people to know, what that air quality looks like. It's become a very critical issue for Utah in general. And the schools and other entities are using these. They decide whether it's an indoor day or an outdoor day based on the data that we provide, and they have that down to the neighborhood level. And so even just recently, we have times when schools are deciding to be inside because the air quality from the fires was so bad. But it's also a critical need in the winter when we have inversion and other pollution. So just one thing that it's not the primary function of the network, but it's something that once we have that connectivity in place, it becomes very easy for us to come in and add additional functions. Another one is advanced Wi-Fi in our parks. This is a wildfire detection system where we're putting in thermal cameras, scan over different areas to see, to try to detect wildfires. This has been something that a lot of cities have been very interested in. And so we have a few of these cameras up and running with plans to continue to deploy these across the Wasatch Front. It provides first responders with advanced notice for fires in areas where there's an urban interface where you have homes up against the benches. So not as critical, I guess, for Midvale, but a lot of cities in the area very concerned about wildfires coming in off those bench areas. So
hey, Roger, this is Quinn Sperry. Is it only cities putting those in, or do you have other private entities that are putting those in?
We're the only ones that we know of. We've not seen anybody else with a thermal camera up. So,
Well, I mean, aside from cities, do you have, just private landowners coming to you saying we want to put in these cameras on our property and using Utopia?
We've had a lot of people offer up land and space, but nobody
Yeah.
willing to actually pay for the cameras.
Got it. Okay.
Said, well, where there's a Utopia fiber city and there's interest, we push pretty far forward. Obviously the connectivity is often the limiting factor, and where we have fiber, it's not. And so for us, it's very easy to put these in. But yeah, we've had people like in Draper who are like, hey, we really would love to have a camera over here in Draper. And like, well, there's no fiber in most of Draper. And so, there's some places where we could do it down lower, where we do have some business routes down lower, but not up higher in the benches. There's just not a lot of options up there. We've upgraded things in the network. We offer every installation goes in with gigabit, and if you get 10 gig, you can get 10 gig anywhere in the network. So we've made a lot of upgrades to be able to support that anywhere, and we also support 100 gig for businesses. Everybody gets their own dedicated connection. So this is a superior system than even other fiber systems. So it blows away any wireless and cable, but even compared to other fiber offerings, those are all shared architectures. Even the other fiber options, and Utopia is very different in the sense that everybody gets their own dedicated connections. There's no sharing on the system, and a lot of that's because we have different competing providers, and we have to guarantee to them that they have their own independent networks that don't interfere with each other. But the other benefit is that everybody gets amazing speeds, and they never slows down, even during peak hours. So it's a really top-notch system. The other providers and options out there, what we see is you think there would be a change and competitiveness, but things have actually gotten worse. The reputation of the incumbent providers has gotten worse. They continue to raise prices, continue to get in trouble from a legal perspective and price manipulation, fraudulent billing, things like that. These are all recent lawsuits and issues. I blocked out the names of the companies, but you can imagine who they are. Alternatively, what we see is that Utopia has become increasingly popular. It used to be just another option, but now it is the top and most popular option out there. People recommend it regularly over any other option, whether it's a news article, social media, every avenue out there. We watch those carefully, and we used to have to try to promote this, and what we find now is that it's our customers who promote it, and our subscribers and our cities and our partners. We don't have to promote it like we used to, but we do still find opportunities to. But our customers speak for it. Also, from a ratings perspective, this is Google ratings, top rated broadband in the state. These are ratings from our subscribers or anyone who can actually go on there and rate us. And the next two, Sumo Fiber and X Mission, are also Utopia Fiber service providers. So not only are we the number one, but we're at the top many positions in the state. Kind of fun that it's a Google rating scale here, and we do better than they do, even on their own system. This is Net Promoter Score. People are very happy with the service. This is when we have people answer the question whether they'd recommend the service to others. We see that people are very, very supportive of Utopia and would recommend us. We think that the reason is because it's not just one thing. It's that we're fast, but we also are rated top highly and based on customer satisfaction. they're also good value. This is an interesting chart. So we're gonna get into some of the specific stats and things. You can see from this chart, things have changed dramatically from a demand perspective and a customer demand. People are signing up like crazy. Just a few years ago, we were really excited to have 100 new customers come onto the system in a month. And then that quickly became 200 and then 300. And we were really cranking at the beginning of this year when we were getting 300 to 400 customers a month signing up and being installed. And that was a very exciting time. Over the last 3 or 4 months, we've averaged probably 950 customers a month coming on board. And so it has skyrocketed. A lot of that we think is obviously the coronavirus situation where people are working remotely and doing remote education and realizing, maybe I could get by with DSL or cable or something else before, but when I've got a couple of kids here and I'm working from home and those connections just don't cut it anymore. And so that's been good for them. It's good for us. So we've seen a dramatic increase in subscriptions coming in. Here's some updates on the UIA projects that we've done. So these are our projects since 2009, and it's where a lot of the effort is nowadays. So UIA generally, and so that's shared with the other 9 cities of UIA. We've done various bonds in different phases. We've got $170 million of projects in UIA generally, and they're all doing really well. So the revenues exceeded all the debt. They're paying for themselves. There's no cost to the cities, and that's what we're using to build out the networks. In fact, the most recent UIA bonds haven't even had a backstop from the cities. We've been able to just say, hey, we've got really strong revenue growth, and we've been able to go get the next phase of the project financed. If you can probably tell, we haven't been back for a while to ask for money or ask for pledges or anything like that. We don't intend to ever again, because we're in a pretty good position to continue the build out of the system solely based on our ability to generate new revenue. So we'll have another phase of general UIA that will be kicking off in February. We've already kind of done a jump start on that. So you'll see that we are building in Midvale, and that phase, the rest of the Midvale is being built out currently in part, and then part of that will be out of the next bond that we'll be doing in February, tentatively scheduled for February. And then we'll be done, which will be exciting. Finally be done, right? We've been waiting a long time to have this thing built out. So we've been building faster than we've ever. I mean, you look at the history since 2004, and the pace of construction right now is much faster than what's ever been done in the past. But so is the revenue growth. So it's all working very nicely. So we're going to get this thing wrapped up. We've got a schedule I'll show you in a minute, but we're ahead of that schedule and doing real well. UIA's had some other opportunities to do these additional projects, so I'll give you an update on those. Woodland Hills was one where the city, they kind of did their own financing, but we did build that out, and we got about 70% take rate very quickly in that city. It's kind of a little bit of a one-off. There's only about 300 homes in that city, so it was a really small project. It's like a third of a neighborhood in Midvale, right? But we did a Morgan City project, and that one has gone very well. And so, we model these things where UIA finances these projects, but then we get revenues off those projects and pay off those or pay for the debt service on those. And we don't put UIA in any sort of exposure. Those cities have to come in here and guarantee the financing of that project. Obviously, we don't want them to lose money and have that fall back on the cities, but they do provide that guarantee. So there's no exposure from UIA's perspective, but there is an opportunity as we continue to add customers. We do get money from an operating perspective on those, and yet we're not really growing the organization for that. So we do, in a sense, make money from those projects because of the increased economy of scale that we get from them and the revenues on the top of it. So Morgan City has been very successful. We hit that target of breaking even on it a full year before any debt service began on that one, and it's looking like it'll be a very profitable project for us. Payson City said, hey, we don't want to wait around for the second half of our project. So a while back, they backstopped the completion of that project. It's going very well. West Point, it was a new city project. It's under construction. That's trending very well. I don't explain these lines, but the faded ones were the forecast. So it was basically, we'd planned for a certain amount of debt, and it's like, we need to get enough revenue to get to that line. That's the one that's flat. And then the light green line is where what we forecasted as revenue that would need to be at so that that project would break even. And then the darker colors, green and blue, represent the actuals. And so we're trending ahead of where we need to be on all of these projects to make sure that not only do they break even, but they're actually be profitable. And profitable, we say, well, we're not a business, you know, we're an organization. So that puts us in a position to pay off debts and expenses, potentially lower prices, you know, all kind of at the discretion of the board of the organizations as to what we do. So what's next for Midvale? So the build out of all remaining areas. So these are the footprints. So we have a map on our website that kind of shows where these are. If you're not familiar with where our little boundaries are, and you know, we use these terms all the time, but I know the general public has no idea what Midvale 12 means. But those are on our website, and there's a map that shows where those areas are. These areas are, this is the way they've been scheduled. And then the first thing I would expect you to say is, well, wait a second, I'm getting complaints for people in these areas. You know, and as we have opportunity to fund and jump ahead of this schedule, we are absolutely doing that. You know, there's a lot of flexibility in our schedule. If there's an opportunity for us to exceed, we jump on it. And so we did get some direction that we've had good demand in Midvale 12 for services, and you know, we're under construction there. And so, yeah, that's not scheduled to be completed till third quarter 2021. And I'd confidently say that we're going to be way ahead of third quarter 2021 for that area, and hopefully the rest of these as well. So we're cranking forward on these things and making good progress. Yep.
I know you got a lot to push through. I just wanted to ask a quick question about that MD12, since you brought it up, just so I can make sure I'm on the same page. It looks like a lot of it's being built out north of Wasatch. So that gap between Center and Wasatch for the MD12, is that, you know, people are already asking, so do I tell them, you know, it could be as late as third quarter 2021 for that space between Center and Wasatch, or is it going to be in this build out that's happening right now?
So it depends how well things go.
Right.
We do run into holdups frequently and end up not finishing and releasing the entire area. And sometimes we have to break things up and release them as portions. As far as I know right now, we don't have specific holdups in Midvale 12. So it'll still take us several months to get it built out across the whole footprint. But that's probably what we're looking at. So I would say our hope is to finish, you know, as soon as 4 or 5 months from now, you know, because there's the construction of the conduit and the fiber, and then we have to come in later and then do all the splicing, the connections, electronics. So there's a lot of phases to this. And the first one is the ugly one that everybody sees. You know, they're out there doing with the heavy machinery, and we fix it up. You know, you can tell the pace that we're building by the number of complaints that are coming in. And so we definitely, you know, are constructing much faster in Midvale. I'm sure you're getting some of those complaints, and we understand it. I mean, we're sensitive to that this is very intrusive on people's properties, right? We get those complaints about, what are you doing on my property? And, you know, I have to explain, you know, well, there's an easement here, and yes, it's ugly. We dug a big ugly hole in your front yard, and there's people out here working, and it's kind of a mess, but we're going to clean it up. And by the time we're done, usually, you know, we get a really good feedback when we're done that we did a good job of cleaning it up. And if that's not the case, we want people to tell us about it, and we will get out there and we will fix it. Everyone is supposed to have a door hanger on their front doors before we come through that has the contact information for the contractor. And so they can contact them and usually get the fastest response from them to come out there and fix any damage once they're done. I mean, you know, if they're working on a hole in the ground, they got to finish the work before they can repair it. But if it appears that they've moved on to a new area and it hasn't been restored properly, you know, first they should have that contact information for the contractor. If they don't have that, they don't know who they are, or they're not being responsive, please contact us. We will follow up and follow through with them, make sure that it gets cleaned up.
and just for your reference, and this is probably the craziest odds I can be, but MD12 is almost the exact footprint for my entire district, with the exception of maybe about 20 houses. So you
We
have
didn't plan it that way.
right. No, that's what I'm saying. So I will get a lot of feedback because it almost doesn't divide into anyone else's area, where a lot of times they'll cut and paste or be part of a district. It's about 80. I would say it's 90% of my entire district. So I've been getting a lot of feedback. So that big one is between Wasatch and Center. So that's why I asked. And while this is being done, I might get some more growing pain questions.
Yeah, as far as I know, the construction should just move right through the whole area. I haven't heard of any specific like, oh, we've had to stop here and that's going to be pushed off for 6 months. That does happen, but I don't think that has happened in this case.
Okay, great. I'll just keep going with that until I hear otherwise.
So we want to continue pushing forward. So these dates are still very tentative and have a lot of buffer in them. We want to over deliver on these things to get this thing wrapped up as soon as possible. The sooner we get them wrapped up, the sooner we can, bring better service, the sooner we can get revenues moving, and the sooner we can, help with the whole debt situation. So,
And just point out too, Roger, the MD12 is actually the largest footprint in our whole city. And it's actually a combination. It was MD12 and 14 and combined in MD12. So that's the largest build in our entire city. So if you guys can get that done in 4 to 5 months, that's quite a feat.
Yeah, my construction people might shoot me for saying something like that, but if there are, the engineering has been completed, the construction contractors are out there working on it, and they push forward, pretty aggressively through these, and so, I'd say we're shooting for 4 or 5 months or so, but we'll see what happens, as far as running into the obstacles. But so far, there's really good progress being made out there.
Perfect, thank you.
And we're continuing to push forward, trying to get these other ones done as ahead of schedule as well. So that's where we're at. I think, I don't know if Kim, if you know any better on Midvale 7, I don't know where that one's at. I forgot to check on that one, but
I'm not sure on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we're receiving a decent amount of issues with people and sprinklers. And as far as I'm aware, we've been pretty responsive. So if you hear anything, just let us know, because we want to be as responsive as possible to those requests as well.
And I'm trying to think, some of the biggest complaints or most common complaints we get, a lot of people get frustrated when there's a park strip and, they want us out in the park strip instead of on the house side of the sidewalk. It is our preference to be in the park strip, but oftentimes there's too many utilities already in that space. And so if we can squeeze it in there, great. But I know that there's been quite a few routes in Midvale where there just isn't space, and the easement, we won't build on the private land, but a lot of people don't understand the public utility easement usually extends several feet past the sidewalk. A lot of people think the sidewalk is the border of an easement or something, and that's usually not the case. And so we do, pull all the easements drawings, and when these are engineered and designed, they do fall into the public utility easement. But we get a lot of people who, chase us off the property and things like that don't understand that usually we are totally in the clear to be a couple feet in past the sidewalk. Usually when we're done with the work, they're not concerned because it doesn't look so bad when it's done. But somebody's out there digging a big hole and moving machinery around on that space, especially on the house side of the sidewalk. People get real frustrated with that. So just as those complaints come up, if you can help people understand that, that's great. If you want to just refer them to us, we can explain that. Usually the contractors on site can explain that as well. But that's a very common misconception about where those public utility easements exist and how big they are. Also, if they're in the aerial areas, that could be frustrating if they're in the back of the yard or something like that. We've got to be able to access those spaces. There's a legal right to do that. We try to be as accommodating as we can, but people do get mad if someone will knock the door and if nobody answers. It's like, well, at some point we can come by and it's like we got to get back there, and there's a right to get and access those poles. And some people refuse to answer the door or talk to anybody, and then when somebody walks back there, then they get mad. And it's like, well, it's not just us, it's the power company, it's the other telecommunications providers. When you've got a right of way with poles or a public utility easement on the front, you do have to grant access to those spaces. So it's a little, we understand it's intrusive as these things get built. We try to be as reasonable as we can with people and try to address their concerns. But some people aren't happy. They're just like, you may never ever come on my property and stay off of here. And we have to get a little bit pushier at that point. So anyways, the next category here is this UIA OPEX repayment. So this is something we like to provide an update to on cities. When UIA was first getting running and it did its own, new bonds, it didn't have a very big grace period in there, and so there were some legislative changes that made it so that UIA couldn't pay operating expenses out of the bond. So the cities had to support the operating expenses of the organization for a period of time until the revenues from those new projects could cover their costs. And so the cities were assessed amounts of money to keep things going long enough to actually get the project going. And so in the position we're in now, we have, we're using any upside for the financing and growth and getting this thing built out. But we have carved out enough money to begin paying back the cities the money that was paid to UIA during that period of time. Originally was on just kind of a little bit here and there. And then it became I think a 5-year repayment schedule. And then we expedited that down to a 3-year repayment schedule. And then now we squeezed that down to a 2-year repayment schedule. So what we have, this was just approved at our June meeting, I believe. We revised our budget to include an expedited payback of that amount of money. And so that had $106,000, almost $107,000 per fiscal year for 2 years to Midvale. And so that usually gets officially approved it's been budgeted for. So our budget's been approved to include that. And then later in the fiscal year, that actually gets approved by the board to remit those funds. We don't have any reason to believe that wouldn't be approved. So I think it would be a good idea for the city to plan on that payment from UIA both this year and next fiscal year. So that's a good thing that we're excited about, that we're actually starting to pay some stuff back to the cities. It's in some regards a drop in the bucket compared to the original bond burden and all that, and we understand that. However, things continue to trend upwards, and so the intention is that each year we'll be coming back and saying we're going to do more, we're going to do more and more and more to eventually relieve the burden to the city on the ongoing payments to Utopia. And if things go really, really well, and in the long term, to pay back any amount of monies that have been paid in the past. That's a very long-term goal, but the progress that's been made here is very good. I think we've all been very, very happy with these new records, month-over-month records and revenue growth and all this other stuff, because it puts us in a really good position financially to help out with the burden. We know it's been a big financial burden for Midvale and all of these cities supporting us on those on the bond payments from the original project. I mean, some cities get frustrated. They say, "Why are we paying Utopia all this money?" I mean, keep in mind that's paying for the projects that were done from 2004 to 2008. So those money, we don't get that money. That money is going to pay the bond on those old projects. But we do want to improve our position financially every year and to increase, that relief. So
Hey,
that's
Roger.
Oh,
This is Councilmember Sperry. I mean, along that line, because I know some people have said we're partnering up with these other cities, and so now that it's profitable, they want to join. And so, what's the advantage to the cities that hung with it during the bad times? And I think you just answered that. And I know I've talked to Kane, so I'm pretty sure I know the answer. But could you just explain that for people that are listening or that will tune in? That my understanding, it would be as it's more profitable, like you just said, they could contribute more money back to those original cities or the partner cities to help pay off the debt obligations. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have to be careful with exactly how that's done because we do
Yeah.
have two separate legal entities, right? We've got UIA and we have Utopia, but conceptually, yes. So
okay. Well, even if
is,
I get it, even if the payments are coming back from UIA to the city, they can then use that for the debt obligation, right? Under Utopia. I mean, right? I mean, I get that. You do have the two separate entities. I get it.
yeah. So generally, the cleanest way to do it is that UIA has grown. Like if we're to say just compared the two organizations, most of the customers and most of the network is now UIA. I mean, it's
right.
a bigger project than Utopia ever was. And so over time, it's made sense to say, let's have UIA take more of the share of expenses, which is only fair. Well, that decreases expenses at Utopia. And so, there's just the right way to do this in fairness to make sure, hey, how we're budgeting and how we're allocating funds and expenses and all this other stuff is fair, so that it's at least appropriate between Utopia and UIA. But I mean, if UIA benefits financially, that is very good for Utopia. It puts Utopia in a position to offload costs and by itself, pay more towards bond expenses and things like that. If we get in a position where we do need to have just a straight up funds transfer between Utopia and UIA, it probably falls in the same category that cities have with like enterprise funds and transfers, funds where you can't just do it. It has to be a, kind of a formal process. And so we're looking at ways to do that. So I can't make commitments as to like exactly how that happens and how much, but the trends are all very good. And the intention is that as whatever that method is of alleviating expenses and bringing in revenues, the intent is that it would be very good financially for the member cities of Utopia, and UIA.
Thanks. And then I want to make sure I understood something that you were talking about earlier. When the other cities come in, they are the ones backstopping the bonds that are done for the build out. Did I understand that right?
From a backstop perspective, I think in a lot of situations, these new cities, it depends on the city and the specific parameters of that city, but in many ways, they're actually backstopping a higher dollar amount than any of the original Utopia cities did. Because the original Utopia cities have always backstopped incrementally. They say, here this will be enough to do 10% of the project. Okay, we'll do the next 10%, and we'll do the next 10%. And so they would do these bonds, and these new UIA projects basically say, here's 100% of this project, and you're going to backstop every single dollar of that project. So from a actual pledge and guarantee perspective, these new cities are taking on a very large proportional pledge, revenue backstop towards these projects. However, they get the benefit of coming in when we've all gotten this working well, right? So they're coming in with a large guarantee, but they're also coming in at very low risk. The structure of this has them that they do not stand to benefit financially, right? They benefit from the services and the same pricing and all the benefits that we offer from a service perspective, but there's no profit share, there's no revenue upside for those cities. However, the UIA member cities and the Utopia cities do have potential access to that. I mean, when you talk to the legislature, and they're not really excited the idea of this being a profitable thing. So if we end up having to go back and say, well, maybe we need to decrease cost of services, that's still a great benefit. But right now, the way we are is we're in a very strong position to pay off debt. That's goal one. Well, goal one is build the network out. Goal two is alleviate the debt, pay off the debts, and that'll be good for the city financially because you're still paying on those original bonds, and we want to decrease the amount you're paying each year. But the new partner cities, there's no money upside potential for them.
So with those new partner cities, I mean, they're backstopping it. I'm trying to understand the timing when that happens. I mean, if you build it out and the take rate is too low to be breaking even, and I know so far they've all been above that, is that when the city steps in and makes up the difference, or is it
Yes. So
UIA covers it short term and then there's a time period and then they pay it? When does that trigger?
So the moment it's $1 in the red. So what happens is they're guaranteeing the debt service payments on their bonds associated with their project. So if there isn't enough revenue that's come in for that project to cover the debt, even if UIA has money and success in other areas, that city will be issued a bill to pay the shortfall. And there's a potential for them, if their specific city-backed project eventually starts, hitting its take rate and exceeding that, that they would get that paid back. So there's a loan structure in there. But in no case does that shortfall ever hit the original member cities of UIA.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. So that's good to know. All right, thanks.
And the reality is there's actually a financial upside even at that break-even scenario. What I mean by, it doesn't sound like it makes sense, but what happens is they're guaranteeing the debt service on the bond for the capital expenses to break even, but that only represents a portion of the revenue off of the project. We also charge a transport revenue for the operating of the network. And so we're guaranteed a positive revenue stream at Utopia for the very first customer of any of those new projects. So from a financial perspective, it's actually very, very good for UIA. Even in a, I don't know if that makes sense, even in a shortfall situation, which we hope we would avoid for a new city, UIA is guaranteed positive revenue.
I was not aware of that before, so that's good to hear.
That's what I've got for my presentation. So what questions do you guys have for us? And I did all the talking here. I'd love for you to fire some questions, especially if they're hard ones. We've got Laurie here and Kim. I do want to make mention that we really appreciate Kane and his leadership. He's been very good at being both supportive of the project in the very difficult times and in the better times, and also holding our feet to the fire to make sure things are going well and we're solving problems and being responsive. But he's been very good and helpful for us as well. So
thanks, Roger.
Point that out.
Roger, thanks for this presentation. This is Councilmember Brown. Mine's more of a comment, I guess, than a question. My area is super excited to get it, but we didn't get anything really on it but those door hangers, and me and my wife walk it every day, and it felt like overnight we painted, put flags up, and had like stuff there, to build. And I was walking one evening, and the weirdest conversation I had, this individual was like, if I knew anyone at City Hall, I would call and complain that their utilities are doing this. And I was like, well, I happen to be your council member. What do you mean? Right. And then which was this really awkward conversation for a moment. But, then I was like, I didn't know what it was. So I was like, I don't know what these are. They didn't have a door hanger, so I didn't know about it yet. I'm like, it does look like we're doing something, like maybe the city is doing something. And I had no way to know what was going on, like what the timeline was. So everyone's like really excited, but really confused. And so I think just going forward, if we can just get a little bit more out in front of it, tell the city when a whole area is going up, that would have helped me out, because I was standing with this person who's like bashing the city, and it felt very rightfully so, because I thought it was a utility. I didn't know what it was, and I knew it could be it could be Comcast, it could have been a whole bunch of people, but when I just didn't know the answer, it made me, it definitely didn't shine great on me as the councilman or Utopia, because no one knew the answer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sorry about that. I mean, I think we try to be in front of that, especially with the door hangers. We have a lot of projects that are smaller, so like a citywide announcement and all this other stuff that causes some trouble. And we also protect it a little bit because of the competitive influence. The more that Comcast is watching what we're doing and aware of that, the more likely they are to show up with some stupid $50 promotion that doubles in 6 months.
Right.
Hey, Roger, I think
try to strike the right balance.
Yeah, I think some of the problem is Blue Stakes is called in before door hangers go out.
Yeah.
So they start getting marked, And then, so construction technically hasn't started, but Blue Stakes has started marking. So I think that is where there's a little bit of confusion of what's happening right now.
Yeah, and the people that go out in Blue Stake, that's going to be from the other utility providers, so they're going to not even have any information. So that very first person on the property is out there spray painting and putting up flags, and they say, "Well, what are you here for?" And they're like, "I'm just marking lines. I don't know what this is for." So, yeah, I think we need to get ahead of that a little bit more with the door hangers.
And I think just generally with this area, because it's over 1,000 homes, I understand what you're saying about the Comcast competitive nature and other things. The issue is a few people were like, I just re-upped my Comcast, now I can't use this I have a year mark or whatever. So I think if we can get out in front of it, even if it takes 4 months, people can get out to like a month to month, like knowing that it could be 4, 5, 6 months, they can just go to a month to month. But people are like, crap, there's Blue Stakes in my yard. If this is Utopia, I just signed up again for Comcast. So, I mean, it's such a large area. I think we should, the more info we can get on something so big, we probably should, just so we can get that take through rate or pull through rate, because, people will not, commit to more time with another utility or another internet provider, if they know that it's coming, if that makes sense.
That's great feedback. And one thing that you should start seeing too when our construction, and I can review this with them. One thing you should start seeing is that we have like these little signs that say this is Utopia when we start doing construction. So it's making people aware. And there used to be, and I will check with them to make sure they're still doing this, that there's information pamphlets, because it is one thing we want to do is that they don't re-up these contracts for another year. So, but it's good feedback and we appreciate it because we're not on the streets and seeing the neighborhoods as well as you are.
Yeah, like I said, it's one of the weirdest experiences that everyone's happy and confused where, so it's like this weird, like, oh, good conversation, but they're kind of frustrated. So it was a weird experience. So I just wanted to pass that along.
I have a question, Councilman Glover. What's the estimate of how long it's going to be before we quit making these pledges every year?
So what you have every year is the payments on the original bonds, which they started in 2004, but they were refunded, refinanced in 2008. There's $185 million of bonds spread across the Utopia member cities. And then the structure of that, I think it was 33 years and it goes up by 2% every year. And it was, a pretty ugly structure. And if we go back in time and do things a little differently, there'd probably be some benefits, but, hindsight's 2020. And so all the cities have that obligation and each city has their proportional section of that and has to budget to make those payments. What we really see is like these OPEX payments as they're coming in have been sized to some extent so that increasing 2% each year stops. And so it shouldn't be increasing year over years when you look at the money you're getting from UIA. And then the intent here is hopefully next year, right now we've got it so it's kind of still flat, but we'd like to actually start decreasing the amount that you'd have to budget every year. And that's just going to be subject to funds availability. What really is going to look like is when we get built out, then the lion's share of all money that we have available to us goes to that purpose, one way or the other. I mean, we got to figure out how to get money between UIA and Utopia and all of that. But I would think that of the amount you're seeing us pay, that the first time we made our first payment towards it was sized to like 2%. And then the next year was like 4%. And this one was like 6 or 7% or something like that. Or maybe that's next year's. And then it'll go to like 20% because we'll suddenly have much more headroom because we don't need that revenue to backstop the next bond because we've built out the whole system. So I don't know what that amount will be, but it'll grow and it'll have a kind of a big jump as we finish the build out of the project into that next year. But all of that is really sit down with the board and the board members of UIA and Utopia and figure out how much money we have available and how much we can allocate towards that. And then if we keep getting customers and revenues and especially new city partnerships, and I admit that is a major part of the strategy. Is if we didn't have new city partnerships and we just limited it to Utopia, I don't know that we ever get to 100% of paying that bond. However, there is opportunity in a mutually beneficial partnership with these new cities that we have enough financial capacity to cover those bonds. So that's a pretty optimistic goal, but we're pushing hard and making great progress towards it.
You haven't done any forecast though to see from the growth you've got now how long that's going to be.
If we just said right now where it is, it would be that we'd be able to cover 30% of those bond payments. Was the last forecast that we had done, which is a lot better than where we're at today. However, if the trend, if we continue to improve the trends, then we hope to come back and say, hey, now that's looking like 40%. Now it's looking like 50%. And if we start having some decent sized city partnerships and growth, then we get some bumps, above and beyond that. And the hope is that we get to 100%.
Okay, thank you.
And generally, I feel like it's good news in a scope of bad news. There was a time, I think, when we didn't know if there would ever be debt relief on those original bonds, and that sounds pretty dire, but that's what it looked like. And I think the recent 5-6 years or so, we've really had some great progress made, and the prospect of providing debt relief on those is looking pretty good. We're pretty excited about that.
Well, I think I can say also, council, from the perspective of the board and for my involvement with the board, as Roger said, that our goal is to get the project built out in all of the 11 cities. Once that's done, I know the next goal of the board will be to cover the original bonds that the cities are obligated to. So I know for a fact that the board will work diligently to try and cover as much of that debt as quickly as possible.
Any other questions for us? Well, we appreciate you giving us some time to chat with you, and feel free to reach out to us, if you have any other questions. And then we try to provide updates. We have a blog post just every month. There's kind of a general update on things, and again, we appreciate the support of the city. We still feel there's a lot of support we get for new customers coming onto the system as they learn about it from their actual city. And so, every opportunity that you guys have to let people know about the project and what we have. You get people who move in from out of state or other areas who haven't heard of Utopia. It's very difficult to get in front of somebody who's living in California, as they're moving to Utah. It's a great decision to do that, but they may not know about Utopia. So we appreciate it when the city does share that information, and it helps a lot. And every customer and every amount of revenue we get on the system ultimately helps us pay off those debts for the city. I also want to call out Matt Dahl as a board member on UIA, and so appreciate his work and service there. So there he is, got the video on there. So thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Any other questions, Madam Mayor Pro Tem?
I don't think we have any other questions. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Kane, it looks like we have about 7 minutes. Do you want to do your UPD update?
Yeah, let's, I think we have Chief Mazarin and Chief Thomas and Lisa Dudley, Chief Financial Officer for UPD. We can go into that presentation right now.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, we've got, I know that under Richard Moon, we've got Lisa Dudley, Chief Master, and then the Assistant CFO for UPD, Richard Moon. I believe they're in the meeting. You can speak up or unmute yourself. They have a presentation.
There you go. Can you hear
Sorry,
me?
I see Richard Moon.
Can everyone hear me okay? They're all shaking their
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we're using Richard's computer. Thank you for giving us a minute to sit down and talk to you about some projects that we've been working on. We want to be conscientious of your time. We don't want your council meeting to start too late. We know it's already almost 7 o'clock. I don't know, excuse me, what your thoughts are, but you want us to just kind of give you an idea of what we'll discuss, and maybe we come back to another council or another workshop, maybe your next one. Would that I don't want you guys to be meeting until 11 o'clock tonight. I don't know what your thoughts.
How long's your presentation, Chief?
We probably need about, to do it right and to answer questions, probably 25 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes.
How's everyone feel? Do we want to do that, to invite them back to another meeting, or?
Which
We
we're
maybe
happy to
just
do.
get highlights of it and then have you come back to our next workshop for the full presentation.
Why don't we do that, Chief, and we'll put you on first on the next agenda.
That'd be great. So let me just kind of give you an idea of what we'll talk about when we come back. We've been working on a number of projects regarding various things that were important to Midvale. Midvale sent us that letter a couple months ago, and we've got some things that are relevant to that. For instance, to discuss fund balance, there was interest in the officer compensation, service transparency, some of those issues. We've worked on building some models that actually show in real time when we talk about, for instance, officer compensation, and we throw out the number 3% increase. So what does 3% look like to Midvale? What is that actual number? And so we've built some models that we'd like to show to you so we can start discussions early on and start discussions about some of these things long before budget season comes around, where we can show numbers that are transparent, very predictable. And, as we're kind of moving into this third year of our budget project, show you some of the fruits that has borne. These are things that we presented to the UPD board. We got very good feedback on it, and we'd like to present them to each of the councils and cities and townships so that everyone has the same information and everyone can see what's going on so that we can have good discussions. Would that be something that you'd be interested in?
I'm seeing a lot of head nods. So yeah, absolutely, Chief. I think we would be.
That'd be great. And then on the service transparency piece, we would actually like to, there was some discussion about, now we kind of have the budget down, but like, what are we actually paying for and getting? We'd like to invite you individually as council members to come down and look at shared services and get some of your questions answered, and so that you can see that, what that really looks like. I could describe it all day, but until you've actually seen it and understand the symbiotic relationship it has with the precincts and how it supports the policing that's going on in your community, it's best to actually be able to see it, and we can accommodate that any day, anytime. And you're welcome to even invite your family if you wanted to come down and look at that. But we will be reaching out to you individually. Chief Thomas will probably do it, and invite council members or any city officials to come take advantage of that. Very similar to what Matt Dahl did when you were doing your feasibility study.
Chief, what are you looking at time-wise for something like that? If we got the council together and did a field trip and took them down on the senior van and basically made a night of it.
We would do that whenever it was convenient for you. We've done that before and it works pretty well. And obviously we practice social distancing and all those other things, but we could make that work whenever was good for you. This month, next month, probably before the snow hits.
Okay, we'll talk with the council further on that. We'll get back to you. That might be a good thing to do for a field trip one night. We've got a couple of council meetings coming up that we don't have a lot on the agenda, so I'm thinking that we can take one of those nights and do something like that if we wanted to. The council chose to do that.
As long as we don't have to do the full experience and spend the night in jail, I'm fine without all of that.
Yeah, we could make it as shorter as long as you wanted. So, but I think it would really be helpful in terms of the discussion and understanding all the services that Midvale receives. I don't know if
Okay, I'll get with you and we'll talk about putting something together then.
Okay.
I didn't know if you wanted to mention that we'll be going through these things with the finance committee too.
Oh, yes. I'm glad you mentioned that, Lisa. Just so you're aware, we would like to come back to a workshop and present some of these issues. But we'll also be doing that with the finance committee on September 8th. And then I believe, I don't know if we've scheduled, we have a semi-annual meeting for the city managers, elected officials, the finance people from each entity to come down and have every 6 months have a meeting with our fiscal unit and ask questions. And so that's upcoming.
It's not scheduled yet, though.
It's not scheduled yet, but it's upcoming. So we're about due for that. So we'd love to see Kyle and Kane and anybody else that want to come to that.
We look forward to it. Those have been good meetings.
Does anyone have any questions for us and before we tune out?
We apologize for the going over, Chief.
No worries. Yeah, we'll maybe look at the next workshop and we'll
Okay.
show you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That concludes our workshop. Madam
That
Mayor.
concludes the workshop. So it's 7 o'clock. Guess we'll start our regular meeting. Mayor Hale is on vacation. So I'm going to go ahead and make the electronic meeting statement. This meeting will be an electronic meeting without a physical location pursuant to Utah Code 52-4-207 as amended by HB 5002. I, Mayor Pro Tem Heidi Robinson, as Chair of the Midvale City Council, hereby make the determination that conducting the meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based upon the fact that the city is unable to ensure compliance with the guidelines and public health protocols mandated by the state's current risk phase. And now we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Chief, you're going to help us out with our flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice and liberty for all. Okay, Rory, will you do the roll call?
Yes. Councilmember Robinson,
Oh, I'm here.
Gettle,
Here.
Brown,
Here.
Barry,
I'm here.
and Glover.
Here.
Okay. Chief Thomas, will you do your report on the UPD, please?
I will appreciate the chance to get to talk to the council and Mayor Pro Tem tonight. First of all, I'll start out my comments in honor of Sergeant Derek Johnson, which is a Draper police officer that was killed in the line of duty on this date back in 2013. Just sometimes when these officers are passing the line of duty years, we don't want to forget the services they provided for our community. Along with that, I just want to mention that Unified Fire Authority lost one of their firefighters considered a line of duty death, and I don't want to speak too much of it because I'm sure Chief Larson is going to, but we here at our precinct, to honor our firefighters, have also put our colors at half mast and in honor of Chris Cage, which is Unified Fire Authority firefighter. He did respond to the 911 incident and it's considered a line of duty death to my understanding. So just want to honor both those men that served our communities. And it's sad to mention it, but at the same time, they're both great men. Just a brief update. We had a great car show back on the Saturday, the 22nd. I don't know if any of the council were along the route waving, but we had well over 100 cars. Laura probably has an more accurate count. We picked up the car show from Cottonwood Heights, and with that many cars weaving through our cities, they were about a half hour behind when they handed it off to us, and we probably went a good half hour past our intended time. But when we got done and landed over by Top Golf, probably about half the cars stuck around, and it was a pretty neat deal. We had Unified Fire Authority with us. They actually, I believe, twice during our portion of the car show had to respond out to calls, but then they were able to morph back in. So it was kind of a fun deal. Just to update at 7816 South State Street, it's my understanding that Officer Wayne does have a draft letter he's going to review with Midvale Legal and get that served upon the owner to try to get that lot cleaned up due to obviously the transient as well as the fire safety issues we have up there. And I apologize, there is a spelling error within my division commander's award. I actually just caught it prior to this meeting, but on the 26th, we had quite an event where we actually had our officers responding to shots fired in Midvale, and at the same time getting into foot pursuit of the suspect, being fired upon by the suspect, and eventually we caught the suspect. And the amount of people, and I got a hold of VEC as well as Unified Fire Authority and got a list of all the officers and entities that responded to that. And it's an incredible amount of people. If something transpires at 1:30 in the morning and I respond to it, and literally we're back in bed by 4 o'clock in the morning, and our suspect is in custody, and the investigation, goes on. It's amazing that not only Unified Police, but Unified Fire Authority and several Valley agencies came together on this single event. Last count, I want to say we're about 90 officers and civilians included in that single event. But and the actual shooting, the shooting victim, to my understanding, is still in the hospital, but is going to survive his wounds. So it was a scary incident, but altogether a pretty good ending. So that being said, I'm just going to read this Division Commander's Award. I summarize the agencies rather than reading each name of the responders, so that way you can kind of see how broad the response was. So if you just let me read this real quick. This is a Division Commander's Award from the Midvale Precinct. It reads as such: Midvale Patrol Officers Showerhammer and Stilson were proactively patrolling the area of Motel 6 in Midvale on the morning of August 26 in search of a wanted sex offender. A private security officer flagged down officers and reported shots fired in room 214. Simultaneously, they observed the shooting suspect flee on foot. Officers pursued the suspect in northeast direction. The suspect fired a handgun at the officers as they continued their foot pursuit. The suspect was able to elude the officers, crossing Fort Union Boulevard to the north. Additional officers responded to the area and initiated a containment plan to facilitate apprehension. Watch Commander Paul Barker was monitoring the radio traffic while attending a UPD SWAT team briefing. Lieutenant Barker consulted with Lieutenant April of the SWAT team and redirected SWAT resources as well as UPD K-9 to assist in the large containment area. Multiple UPD officers as well as outside agency officers responded and coordinated and led to the suspect's eventual capture. Further investigation led to recovery of the weapon used in the shooting of the victim of Motel 6, as well as aggravated assault against the UPD patrol officers. The Unified Police Violent Crimes Unit detectives gained information the suspect was possibly involved in additional bank robberies. I would like to recognize the teamwork and coordination involved in this incident and therefore award the Division Commander's Award to the following personnel. The list is attached, the summary of those that responded. From UPD Midvale Command Staff, myself and my Lieutenant, Kim Malone. UPD Watch Commander, UPD Precinct had 6 officers respond. UPD Midvale Street Crimes had their detective respond. UPD Taylorsville Precinct had 5 officers respond. UPD Taylorsville Street Crimes had 2 detectives respond. UPD Mill Creek Precinct had 3 officers respond. UPD Magna Precinct had 2 officers respond. The UPD SWAT team deferred off their planned warrant service that was to be served in Magna, and 31 team operators responded to the area. UPD K-9 unit sent 4 of their K-9 teams. The UPD Violent Crimes Unit responded with 3 of their detectives. UPD Forensics sent 3 investigators. UPD Public Information Officers sent their sergeant, their supervisor. Sandy PD sent 4 officers. West Valley PD sent 2 officers. West Jordan PD sent 5 officers. Cottonwood Heights sent 1 officer. Utah Highway Patrol sent 3 troopers. Unified Fire Authority Platoon B sent 6 medical responders, and VEC had a call taker and a dispatcher handling the scene. Within that list, the specific names are listed. I am going to attend the appropriate venues to personally give out the Division Commander Awards to these folks. It's going to take a while, obviously, but it was an excellent team effort, and I couldn't be prouder. To bring this to resolution as fast as it was, and just to know that everyone went home safe that night, and we put a bad guy in jail was incredible. So that's really all I have for tonight. If anyone have any questions, I know some of the council have reached out to me over the last week or 2, and I've been able to, I think, answer questions immediately and hope to continue to do so. But that's all I have.
Chief, I have a quick question. I didn't realize until now that the suspect at the Motel 6 shooting had fired at UPD officers. And I guess there might be some investigative work that needs to be done, but was he also fired upon?
No.
Interesting.
Yeah, the suspect, if you can picture the La Quinta Inn diagonally towards Danny's, there's a brown brick building.
Yeah.
Our officers, as they came around the corner, they used their police tactics, and rather than charging around the corner, they slowed down and made sure it was safe to continue. And as they went forward, like kind of through the drive-through area of McDonald's, the suspect was near Denny's for quite some distance, and 2 shots were fired in their direction. They really were more ducking for cover, and as soon as they were able to reacquire, he was gone, and that's where he was able to elude the officers across in northbound pattern. So if you can imagine, the containment area was well north of Fort Union, State Street to the east. The actual I-15 was our west containment, and clear to the south containment was 75th South. So, although the suspect ran in the north, he was armed. He had shown propensity to violence, fired upon our officers, as well as shot a victim in the hotel. So the real big concern was the building under construction. We weren't, once he disappeared near, they weren't sure if he continued north, if he possibly got in that building. So just by luck, we had the SWAT team that was briefed up, geared up, and getting ready to go serve a high-risk warrant in Magna. They deferred all those assets, and that really assisted us in saturating that area. A lot of construction, a lot of warehouse district area, and eventually he was found actually hiding in boxes in a storage unit.
I think it's great, whether it was by training or circumstance or a combination of both, that we didn't have an officer involved shooting as well. We know how those incidents have occurred across some cities. So kudos to you and your folks for that.
Thank you, Councilman. Any more
I
questions?
have like this random question. This is probably less for you, Chief, and just generally, since I've been on council, I feel like at least once a year we have a shooting or a death in that hotel or Motel 6. Nowhere else in the city have I, it seems like we have such a universal problem. Like when can the city step in and say this is a legitimate health hazard? You know, where people actually are dying and are actually shooting at each other, and it's the only place that that's happening. Why can't we step in and put pressure on the owners to do something or whatever it needs to be done? But it seems odd to me that we can just allow essentially a death trap to continue. Does anyone know how that works?
I know there are some cities, and Chief, you might remember I sent you and Chief Mazarin an article pretty recently about, you know, just several cities in the United States that have closed down motels like this that have been very high utilizers of services as far as police, fire, ambulance goes. Lisa, who just popped up, might want to speak, but, you know, Councilmember Brown, I think you and I have talked before, you know, why we can't just go in and say, hey, you know, this place is nothing good, and we, the city, want to close it. And I think, you know, that is an endeavor worth discussing.
It is a pretty significant endeavor. And the chief has been on that, and we've talked about it, and he's had several, we've had conversations about what we possibly can do. You're right. Some cities have handled high crime areas and work towards pulling their business license and or shutting them down with the health department, those kinds of things. It does take a coordination of a lot of different agencies to make that work, but and it would require an ordinance change from us to kind of firm up. In fact, Salt Lake City has done it with an area there, or a hotel there on North Temple, and I've had conversations with their city attorney to talk about how we can get an ordinance that basically attacks their business license.
I would love to see, you know, us move in that direction, especially if we can get numbers that show, you know, we get the numbers all the time. And in fact, we went to the state and said, we have this family resource center in Utah, and here's the statistics that show why we need more funding for more officers in this area. And I think it'd be nice to compare those numbers to, you know, the what I see as a more higher crime area, and that's that whole corridor there, which seems to have much more going on than our resource center as far as violent crime goes.
Absolutely. But the one thing that is difficult is that a lot of the criminal activity, or at least many of the cases that I see that arise out of that area, it is an area as a whole that maybe not, it might not be able to be totally attributed to that business. For example, you know, the surrounding parking lot or all of that, the crime in the motel itself or in that is not as easily, or is not as high as you would think, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I just would like to drill down into those numbers, because at some point there's going to be a reckoning where the community says, hey, why are we having, I mean, there was a child who died there last year. I'm surprised it didn't happen after that incident, but, you know, I want to stay ahead of it rather than be reactionary when something else happens there.
And yeah, and that has been on our list of things to work on with the potential new ordinance is somehow defining what, I mean, because maybe we could do something as far as the number of critical incidents or something at any, you know, one business. But anyway, we have talked about it, so we'll work on that some more and get back to you.
Cool. Thanks, Lisa, and thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you all. If that'll be no more questions for me, I'll sign out here and be on standby.
Thanks, Chief. Now, Chief Larson, would you like to do your report on UFA?
Sure, be happy to. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. It's always good to be with you. I spoke to some of the medics that responded to the call that the chief was talking about at Motel 6. And as always, we really appreciate working with our UPD brothers and sisters and all the support that they give to us to help us respond safely and get the job done. They're always a great support to us. So thank you, Chief. I want to start off with some sad news. Chief Thomas mentioned our firefighter that's retired, Chris Cage, that recently passed away. We lost one of our own. Chris Cage died Saturday, August 29th. He succumbed to a difficult battle with cancer, which is presumed to be work-related. Chris retired from the department in September 2016 after spending 31 years with our department. And as an active member of Utah Task Force 1, Chris was part of the response to the World Trade Center following the attacks on 9/11. He was an expert in his field and spent a significant amount of time training and mentoring others while being an active member of the Salt Lake County Unified Fire Authority and Utah Task Force 1. He'll be greatly missed, and our thoughts and prayers go out to Chris's family. We also, I mentioned this in our last meeting, I believe, briefly, the passing of firefighter paramedic Jason Ball. It was with great sadness when we learned that paramedic Jason Ball took his own life early in August. Jason joined the department in 2007 and spent the last several years as a paramedic at Station 101, one of the busiest houses in our district. In addition to his duties as a medic and a firefighter, he was known for his outstanding videography skills and produced some amazing work for us with the Information Outreach Division. He also spent several years supporting the Wildland Single Source Program, including spending a season with the Salt Lake one-hand crew. And again, our thoughts and prayers go out to his family. This really has brought to light the importance of our peer support program, which we've had going for a little bit here. We just recently assigned a captain who's had some extensive training in counseling and other types of support services for PTSD and other issues that some of our members may be going through. Your own captain, Ben Shear at Station 126, has also been trained in this program and is acting as a peer support member for the other members of the department. And he does a great job, and I'm going to try and get him to give a short 2 or 3 minute presentation to the council here in the next month or two. So again, it's been a tough August month for us, but we're very grateful for the support that we have felt through this time. We had a deployment, our USAR deployment to Louisiana on August 26th. The Utah Task Force 1 received an activation notice from FEMA and to respond to Hurricane Laura as it approached the Gulf Coast. The team was comprised of 80 personnel from UFA, Draper, Park City, Salt Lake City, and South Jordan, and West Valley fire departments. We sent, I think, 30. And after the damage needs assessment was completed by FEMA on scene, the team was demobilized and returned to Salt Lake on August 29th. So they were gone just 3 days. And fortunately, because of the damage assessment, we were able to get them back and get them back in service. We had a deployment to California. California sent out a request on August 19th for help with their extreme wildfire conditions that they're having right now. Utah responded with 2 task forces, and UFA was assigned to Task Force 2 along with West Valley, Provo, Orem, Lone Peak, and Pleasant Grove. The fire complex we are assigned to is the BTU complex. The largest fire in this complex is called the Elkhorn Fire, and is the fire that Task Force 2 is assigned to. They are working out a staging base near Red Bluff, California. I think we have 6-8 members or so from UFA that are part of that group. Our crews right now are assigned to areas where they have been doing direct fire attack and indirect fire line construction. Other crews and heavy equipment have created dozer lines around the various parts of the fire. And Task Force 2 is keeping it in check and making sure the fire doesn't jump the lines. California Fire has been very appreciative of our crew's assistance. If anyone's looked on a Google wildfires in California right now, it seems like the whole state's going. A strategic plan update. We're going to be holding stakeholder meetings September 8th and 9th at the EOC, September 17th and 18th at Station 123, and lastly, on September 19th via Zoom to discuss an external SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges. An analysis of that with mayors, council members, business leaders, school districts, and I believe oh gosh, who is it from Midvale that's going? Matt.
Me.
Matt, yeah. So Matt, we appreciate your participation in that. That's going to help us out a great deal. We did this thank you. We did this several years ago, and it's time to update the strategic plan. So I'm looking forward to taking care of that. I'll be at all of those meetings. This will really help us build a successful strategic plan to serve our communities in the best way possible. Recruiting update, we had 397 applicants take the written test, with 90 moving on into the oral interviews that took place just at the end of this last month. And from that group, we will end up with 20 to 25 recruits out of 397 applicants. So we're trying to pick the best of the best. Captain's promotion process is moving forward, starting that this month with a captain's boot camp. After that, a written exam is going to follow in October, followed by an assessment, and then the candidates are ranked 1 to however many we have. And from that list, we have an active promotion list to pull from for future captains, clear until the spring of 2022. So we've got a lot going on. The crews are very busy, and we're just we feel very blessed and privileged to serve your community. I'll entertain questions at this point if there are any for me. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Chief Larson. Now, Councilmember Ghetto will read the proclamation for an idle-free Utah. Maybe.
I'm sorry, could you give me like 2 minutes? Is there something else? I'm sorry, I'm just eating. I'm eating a peanut butter rice cake, which is not, I mean, I can do it without, I'll just do it without video. Sorry,
Okay.
a little messy. Okay. We have a proclamation here today that's going to recognize September as the idle-free month. So the proclamation reads, whereas idling vehicles emit particulate matter and other pollutants that, when inhaled, are known to cause serious health problems, especially for children and sensitive populations. Whereas Utah had the first idle-free campaign in the nation, and 2020 marks the 30th anniversary of the idle-free declaration issued by the governor of Utah. And whereas we seek to educate and promote workplace charging and idle-free as key goals of Utah's Energy Action Plan. And whereas the Utah Clean Cities, along with Utah school districts and the Utah State Board of Education, developed and put into place a school bus idling reduction program, an elementary student education plan informing youth and the general public about the benefits of reducing idling. And whereas the Utah State Board of Education trains more than 3,000 bus drivers annually on idle-free bus operations and driver training. And whereas Utah public and private fleets have supported the efforts of idle-free to benefit our communities by encouraging driver training and idle-free fleets and using clean advanced fuels. And whereas the grassroots idle-free education program developed by Utah Clean Cities has grown with support from the Utah legislature, including the Clean Air Caucus, Utah Clean Air Partnership, Breathe Utah, Utah Society for Environmental Education, and the State Health Department's Utah Asthma Program and Recess Guidance, and has reached more than 15,000 students across 450 schools. And whereas these efforts have resulted in 4 prominent school districts, including Salt Lake City, Park City, Granite, and Canyons, to be fully committed to 100% idle-free campuses with extraordinary dedication to drop-off and pickup zones where children are most vulnerable. And whereas 9 Utah cities have declared idle-free, including Alta, Cottonwood Heights, Draper City, Holiday, Logan, Murray, Park City, Salt Lake City, and Sandy by having idle-free ordinances. And whereas we applaud the Zion National Parks idle-free education and their expanding green fleet program. Whereas we applaud the more than 70 mayors for their support of this endeavor, and about 70 mayors are mentioned here, which I will not read, but Mayor Hale is amongst these. Now, therefore, Now, therefore, I, Robert Hale, Mayor of Midvale City, which I am not, and the Midvale City Council, which I am a member of, do declare the month of September 2020 as idle-free in Utah. In witness thereof, I have hereunto fixed the seal of Midvale City this first day of September 2020.
Thank you, Councilmember Gettle.
You're welcome.
Now we're going to move into the public comment section. So this is the portion of the agenda that allows any person to express ideas, concerns, comments, or issues. If you would like to comment on a public hearing item, you will be allotted time during the public hearing portion of the meeting. Email your comments to Laura Magnus at lmagnus@midvale.com. When commenting, please limit your comment to 400 words, which is the equivalent of 3 minutes. Include your first and last name. Include your city of residence, this is optional, and include the name of your agenda item. City staff will only read into the record the equivalent of 3 minutes, 400 words, so please be concise with your statements. Laura, are there any public comments?
No, there are no comments, Mayor Pro Tem Robinson.
Thank you. And now we're going to do council reports. I'm first, and I have nothing for tonight, so on to Councilmember Glover.
The only thing I have again this evening is the West Nile virus is still out there. Be careful and use the protection you need if you're out, and dump your standing water around your homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Glover. And Councilmember Brown?
I do not have anything extra tonight. We covered it in the Utopia meeting, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gettle?
Same as Councilmember Brown, I wanted to bring up that the motel corridor in my district, and we talked about that tonight. I will just give everyone a word of warning. Don't eat a peanut butter rice cake minutes before you're supposed to talk, because it's not a very good combination for the camera. That's it for me.
Wise advice, Councilmember Gettle. And Councilmember Sperry?
The only thing I have is I want to thank Stacy Phillips for her efforts and over many months, even years, resolve the paving issue coming off of 215 for herself and her neighbors on the cottages at night, and the city employees that helped her achieve that finally. I know it wasn't the smoothest thing going through that for so long, but we finally got it done, so we're glad. And just Stacy, thanks for the patience and also the persistence in that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Sperry. And now for the city manager reports, I'm going to turn this over to Kane.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, Pro Tem. Kind of a group effort tonight on the city manager's report, but I'll talk about a couple of things. A couple of weeks ago, Mayor Hale attended a meeting with the Canyon School District regarding their ability to provide tele-education. He came back from that meeting with a map of the entire district, and that included all 4 of the cities that belong to the Canyon School District. And there's over 1,000 households in the district that don't have access to the internet. And you know, we looked at that and said, well, what's the problem? And as we discussed it, we decided to put together a meeting with Canyons District. They also invited United Way. And then we also asked Utopia to join, see what they could do to help with that. So the meeting was held yesterday, and very productive meeting. Got a lot of information out of it. It seems like the main problem is the ability for the parents to provide internet due to the cost. I know for Midvale, as I looked at now the map had dots on each one of the households that didn't have internet, and I know that we have access either through Utopia or Comcast or CenturyLink in those areas. And so it appears that the main problem is parents don't have the funding to provide internet. So we're out of that meeting, which Laura attended with me. We're going to be working with the Canyon School District to identify exactly the location of those residents here in Midvale. Obviously we can't help with the whole problem in the district, but we can sure make an effort here in Midvale. One of the things that we'll be looking at is we have some ability to use some funding through the CARES Act to help with these kind of issues. And so we're going to be looking to working with the district and United Way, and actually in a meeting today with the Gardner Company, Christian Gardner pledged his support and the support of Wasatch, the Wasatch Group, to help with the problem. We'd like to see if we could solve it in our city. And as they're dealing with this COVID problem, this is going to be, if this continues on, they're going to put a big effort into teleeducation district-wide. Just to give you an idea, one of the things they're talking about doing is setting up a Wi-Fi network at the Midvale Elementary School that would have a radius of about 1.5 miles. So anyone within that 1.5 mile radius could pick up the Wi-Fi from that system and get the education through that. So I wanted to make the council aware that that's something that we're going to be working on. We're going to be holding another meeting with that group as we have identified. We've actually identified funding through the city that we can use. So we bring that back to the city council for your approval. The other item I wanted to touch on, you may have seen in the news that there was a legislative audit that was done on all the 911 services throughout the state. The VEC, Valley Emergency Communications, didn't come out very well in one category in call taking and answering calls. We are below the national standard and have been for several months. I just wanted the council to know that the board was made aware of that through the legislative audit, and we've immediately started work to correct that. We didn't, number one, the board wasn't aware of that. It wasn't made aware of that until the audit came out, but we will, as a board, we will immediately go to work on that. We've, our new executive director of Valley Emergency Communication has been tasked to come back with to the board in October with recommendations of how to solve the issues and the problems. And I've already got a couple of emails from him, and he's solving the problem as we speak. So if the council has any questions on that, I'd be glad to answer those kind of offline. And I'd be glad to provide you with a copy of the legislative audit. In fact, I will send that to all of you along with the resolution of the board on the actions that the executive director needs to take to correct those efforts. It's very concerning to me as a board member to hear this, and I think it was for all of the cities, the 17 entities that belong to Valley Emergency Communications. Any questions on either one of those items? I think Laura will add a little bit to the school district education item. The other one I wanted to touch on is you've been getting emails from a resident that lives right next to the Midvale Elementary School on traffic problems. We're going to be working on that. We've tasked the city engineer to get with the safety engineer with the Canyon School District. We're not sure how much of the problem is going to go away when they fully get the Mid-Valley reconstruction project done. Right now, they're using one entrance to the school. We think that's really compounding the problem there. But I would just wanted the council to know, because you've all been copied on those emails, that we are working on that. We'll be working with Canyons District. We will be looking at the school crosswalk there to see if there's something that we can do to improve that situation. And UPD is also, Chief Thomas is also going to be keeping an eye on that with his crossing guards to let us know what the issues and problems are there. But I think from what I'm hearing, there are a lot more traffic issues there this year than there ever have been. Now I'll turn some time over to Matt Dahl, and I think he's got an item to report. And I'll ask Kyle Maurer to report, and then the remainder of the time give it to Laura Magna. So Matt.
Sure. The items I was going to cover have one way or another been addressed in this meeting. So the only thing I was just going to add for this evening is that at the last meeting, Councilman Gettle, you would ask some questions about our policies regarding cannabis cultivation in pharmacies and our interaction with the business community regarding those issues. It's our intent that we will be coming back at the next meeting to discuss those a little bit further. So I didn't want you to think that we had missed those. We weren't quite prepared for this meeting to discuss those items. So they'll be coming up, and that's all I had to cover for this evening.
Thanks, Matt. I just really quickly wanted to give the council an update on the electronic signature software that we had been looking at, and there was a request for us to look at. IT looked at a number of products, and then we looked further at those products. And one is one called DocuSign that you may have already used if you've purchased a home recently, or if you've purchased a car, refinanced anything, you most likely did it through DocuSign. It came out on top in our evaluation because of the security behind it. And then also it integrates with our current document imaging system called OnBase. So it would eliminate manually having to put signed items into OnBase, which would be excellent. The total cost, and this includes the first year implementation, is $31,000. Of that, there's potential ongoing costs of around 11 to 12,000 if we choose to keep the software in its current configuration that we're proposing to start with. However, once we see how much the software is used, we may be able to reduce the number of users that's on it. Our pricing is also dependent on what's called an envelope, and that's essentially when a user sends a document out to sign. So we aren't charged for every signature, but we're charged for somebody to place the signatures on the electronic document and send it out. As a control, especially for the council where there's a monetary figure attached, we will next year, if we decide to move forward, we will need to come back with a budget request for it. So you will see it in that form next year after, like we're not able to use CARES Act money for it. And at that point, we can also look if there's anything less expensive or if it's just not being used the way we thought we would. So that's the current update we have on that.
Laura?
Okay, thank you. I really enjoyed meeting with Kane and Utopia and the Canyon School District to talk about ways that we can address the inequities of digital devices and the internet in our community. And I was really, like Kane said, really interested to see how spread out it is. I counted how many homes we have here in Midvale that don't have adequate broadband service. And it's about the same in Draper. So it's really spread out all throughout the area, not just in our town. So I'm excited to work on that with them. And I know Utopia is real excited too. When I spoke to them, they pointed out that their goal is always to build out entire communities. They don't just focus on areas where the best rate of return ROI is. And so they're excited about working with us too. The one thing that I thought was real impressive is that the school district has offered to work as the internet service provider, which would save about $30 a month right there. So I'm excited about the potential and I'm looking forward to working with them on that. I also wanted to thank the chief for doing such a great job on the rolling car show with Cottonwood Heights. He did a great job and we received a lot of compliments. We had about 150 comments on social media, email, phone calls, thanking the city council immensely, thanking UFA and thanking UPD. People felt like they really needed some sense of normalcy and they really enjoyed the event. And Cottonwood Heights City Council and the community really enjoyed working with us on partnering on an event. And we're looking forward to partnering on future events. So that was a lot of fun. Another thing on Utopia I wanted to bring about is Councilmember Brown said it perfectly. People were real excited about to get Utopia in their neighborhoods, but also a little bit confused about the process. So I met with Kim, the chief marketing officer over at Utopia, and we discussed some of the concerns that we saw on social media and some of the questions we received here at City Hall. We were receiving some calls and came up with a list of questions and answers that are most commonly asked. I sent it to the city council so that you have those. And I also sent it to our key staff who answer phones. Tonight, I'm going to be sending it out on social media just to have some of those answered. I really think that it's important that Utopia does their own messaging, but I want the residents to also know that we're asking these questions for them. And so some of those key questions I will put on our website as well. And Kim over at Utopia does a great job of answering the questions on Midvale residents, making herself available. She gave them her contact information. So she's also on social media, making sure that our residents have their questions asked. And that's all I had tonight. Thank you.
And that concludes the city manager's report, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Kane. And now for the department report, I'm going to turn it over to Glenn Kennedy. Maybe.
Sorry, I forget to hit unmute. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Quick report tonight. If I can get it started. There we go. Public Works update for September 1st. Our staffing, we are down one water operator. The selection process will begin next week. We had an employee of close to 2 years, seek employment elsewhere. He wanted a change in career, so we have an opening in water. Last week, Susie, our public works receptionist, retired. Amber Hersenbrunner started as her replacement today. She's a Midvale resident. She lives on Allen Street, and if her first day is any indication of her future, she's going to be awesome. So we're super excited to have her on board. Streets and Storm, I just wanted to give them a quick thank you. They've performed deep cleaning of sorts on a number of city properties over the last few weeks. The basketball court on Main, trimmed the trees, painted the benches, street swept, did the tree rings. Looks like a whole new park, and it sounds like some pickleball will be played there shortly. They also trimmed the bushes, the Fetzer bushes on either side of the underpasses, and cleaned both underpasses on Center and Wasatch. We've got a bit of a homeless issue. Those bushes are a jungle, and it provides hiding spots and camps. So we're going to look for a long-term solution, but short-term, we have trimmed them up. Then they've also cleaned the parking lot on First and Main there behind the museum. Did a good job there as well. Water and sewer, they focused on training. Sewer division received training and a demo on a vacuum sewer system that will be installed in the Bluffs development. It's kind of a new, well, it's definitely new for us. There's only one other system like this in the state. So the training was definitely beneficial. They also attended training on pump operation and maintenance for the Grundfos pumps that are installed in all the city lift stations. There's 2 water operators that have started classes taught by Jordan Valley to prepare for their operator certification test through the state. Parks, cemetery, and sanitation. Currently, both of our parks field workers are out due to COVID quarantine. So there's other public works staff are filling in to cover the critical functions there in parks. Another big thank you to the Tippets for their help this year. I believe they're out of town this week. However, they have been a huge help in the main park. Andrea and Laura are coordinating on creating the public messaging for October's bulk waste, which I believe is pretty much wrapped up and ready to go. And then this Saturday is our e-waste event. So you can go ahead and tell your neighbors, bring down their e-waste and shredding to City Hall, 9 to 11. And the flyer's there for acceptable and not accepted items.
You said this weekend on the flyer in front of me, it says the 12th.
I lied. It is the 12th.
Okay.
Good catch. Thank you. And that is my report this evening.
Thank you, Glenn. Looks like it's time for the public hearing. Do I have a motion to go into public hearing?
I move that we go into a public hearing.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Motion passes. Let's see, tonight we will consider a proposed text amendment to modify lighting and signage standards in the Jordan Bluffs sub-area 4 zone. Alex?
Hello, good evening, everybody. So as our Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, we've got a request tonight to amend the lighting and sign standards in the Jordan Bluffs sub-area 4 zone. This did come from Adam Langford over at Wasatch. Wasatch is the owner of all of the private property in this sub-area zone. And they're looking to tweak some of those lighting and sign standards to hopefully result in better projects over there in that portion of Jordan Bluffs. This zone was originally adopted back in 2017, and it was the first one that we did for Jordan Bluffs. Wasatch is approaching completion of 2 projects over there. There's a little under 400 residential units that are built, and all of them should be open for occupancy at this point. We're just wrapping up some of the last kind of site plan related topics. And Wasatch has submitted this request so that they can kind of tweak some of those lighting and sign implementations over there. So I'm just going to dive right into what some of these changes are. They're not terribly complex. So we'll just move through them relatively quickly. Under the lighting changes, we've got first just a formatting change that clarifies and separates out some of the requirements that were previously all clumped into a single paragraph. Makes it a little bit easier for us as we're reviewing projects to point out specific issues that plans aren't satisfying. Additionally, in the lighting, there is proposed a new exception section that would allow a few types of exceptions for things that weren't considered when we adopted this lighting ordinance update last year. First, it would allow uplighting, a limited amount of uplighting based on property area, provided that there's no light trespass across property lines and that it's limited to architecture, landscape, or artistic uses. It would exempt streetlights on public or private streets from the maximum output limit, which is set at 100,000 lumens per acre. And then it would exempt string or bistro lighting from the cutoff, direction, and shielding requirements. Those bistro lights are ones that folks like to put up, but it's impossible to shield them. So we'd rather have the nice ambiance, the nice design that comes with those rather than needlessly imposing additional requirements. On the signage side, this text amendment would allow larger banner signs than are currently permitted. The ordinance currently allows a 48 square foot banner per fence or per building wall. As proposed, it would increase that size up to 80 square feet, and it would also allow any amount of banner signage on temporary construction fences. You might have noticed when that phase 1 project over there on Jordan Bluffs was going up, they had some construction fencing with some banners that had renderings of what the project would look like when it was finished. The Planning Commission thought that those were better than blank canvas walls, black or green or something. And Wasatch agrees they like those as part of their marketing strategy when they're building these new projects. Other temporary signs would also be allowed, such as balloons or inflated signs, flags, feathers, etc. And they'd be permitted for up to 30 days per quarter. A temporary sign permit would be required for this, and that's similar to what we've done in other zones, but it does extend the time period. Currently, most of the city is allowed to have those kinds of temporary signs for 14 days per quarter. This 30 days would basically double that over the whole year. And then finally, some signs for grand opening periods are proposed. This is also something that's in the other commercial zones throughout the city, but this proposal would extend that. So where currently we allow grand opening signs for 30 days within the first 90 days of a business opening, this proposed change would extend that period and say from the first certificate of occupancy and up to 18 months or 30 days after the final certificate of occupancy for a project, they could use those signs. That's also intended to allow some of these larger residential projects that open in stages to have that marketing strategy or implement that marketing strategy and trying to attract new tenants so they're not sitting empty. For projects that have one certificate of occupancy, it keeps a pretty similar timeline to what we have in the current ordinance because it's all based on that last certificate of occupancy for the project. We took this to the Planning Commission last month and we had a good discussion on the construction fencing banners. And ultimately the Planning Commission voted to recommend the council approve this language as proposed. And that's the same thing that the staff would recommend doing tonight as well. We've got Adam Langford here from Wasatch. He or I would be happy to answer any questions that the council might have. Thanks.
Alex, I do have one question.
Mm-hmm.
There's an echo for one.
Is that on me? It might be on me.
It might be, yeah. Now I'll try. Okay, perfect. So going up or down, whichever direction you're going, on Bingham Junction, there's remnants of a sign that used to be, I guess, across from the 55 plus apartment complex as you get down towards the track station. So there's, you know, a wooden post that sticks out of the ground pretty significantly. I don't know how high it goes, but it's a remnant of one of these signs that says, you know, grand opening community. Do we have anything that says, you know, when these posts need to come down? Because I'm assuming that one's an oversight and it's just maybe got forgotten about. But I would just want to make sure that we don't have, these pretty significantly tall posts lingering in the city years after something opens.
So the definition of a sign includes all of the structural components that are necessary to put the sign in place. So all of those time limits should apply to something like that. I'm not sure I know exactly where you're talking about, but if you could send me some info on it, I can get Detective Wayne out there to make sure it gets pulled down.
Okay, it's right by the tracks station across, same side of the street as Tuscany Villas and the senior community there.
Okay.
But I will send you a picture of it tomorrow on my morning walk.
Perfect.
Thanks.
This hearing is now open for public comments. Laura, did we receive any public comments?
No, Mayor Pro Tem Robinson, I do not see any public comments at this time.
Okay. Would the applicant like to say anything?
Sure. I'll take just a few minutes, just be brief. Yeah, we do appreciate staff working with us on these changes. As you all know, we are a business. We have to drive traffic and get new tenants into our community. That's why we're looking for these changes that give us more flexibility in signage. If we've experienced these last two communities leasing up, some of the restrictions, especially on that initial lease up period, are some of the probably the most strict we've seen in any of the municipalities we've worked with. So we're really looking for a little more flexibility to help us with our marketing and leasing up these communities. The landscape lighting, that's something new in that we've never had that regulated by a city before, in any of the states we've worked in or any of the communities in Utah along the Wasatch Front. That's something new for us, but if that's the direction the city council wants to go, then we're happy to comply. But typically that's not something we've seen. It's an additional cost to us. Not only the initial maintenance, but the long-term cost of lighting. But it's one of our goals has always been to create a resort-like feel. That's always one of our goals at any Wasatch community. Landscape lighting around the pool and uplighting on trees is important to us. So yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Adam, how is it different, what you want to do on the bluffs versus what you've done already in the Bingham Junction project area? So I guess my question is, what's different about lighting now in the bluffs that, if you were able to comply with our existing lighting ordinance for the Bingham Junction project area, why the change now?
Well, the way I understand it, and the issue was really, like Alex said at the beginning, was clarification. When we wrote the Jordan Bluffs ordinance, and I think this ties into the recent dark sky ordinance that was passed, but when we wrote the Jordan Bluffs zone, there was no intent on our part to exclude landscape lighting. But our understanding from staff was that landscape lighting was not allowed. It is allowed in a residential zone. A homeowner can put up lights, uplight, whatever they want, but for our project at Jordan Bluffs, it was not allowed. So this was our only option, was to come in with a text amendment. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's not allowed currently, at least the way the ordinance is being interpreted to us.
I can expand that a bit if you'd like.
Sure, Alex.
So in 2017, when this ordinance was adopted, we used the lighting standards that we had been operating under for something like 10 or 20 years. Last summer, we came through and revised, well, let me back up. Last year, we redid those lighting standards for the rest of Jordan Bluffs. and we established a new, what we call a friendlier way to handle lighting that looked more at the impacts on the surrounding properties rather than the impacts within the property. And after we adopted that standard in the rest of Jordan Bluffs outside of this zone, we took that and stretched it across the entire city, excluding the single family residential zones. So all the multifamily zones, all the commercial zones, the industrial zone, everything got this new lighting standard that was intended to simplify the process by looking more at outside impacts rather than inside ones. The biggest change, the biggest shift in direction in how those ordinances were written was that the old language looked at requiring a uniform amount of light across the entire site. And the new language looks at maximum output instead and the direction of that light. So when we adopted the new standards, we put in some restrictions on trespass at the property boundaries, uplighting limitations so that we didn't have just light going out into the air, with the intent being that it would be kind of a baby dark sky ordinance like Adam mentioned. The plans for Jordan Bluffs that Adam has been building were originally reviewed under that old language. And then when the projects were approaching completion, we heard that they wanted to put in that uplighting, and that was after that point the ordinance had changed. And since they were going in to basically revise the plans, they had to comply with the current standards, not the old ones. So this change would essentially take it closer to what was allowed in Bingham Junction, because Bingham Junction was built under that old standard that didn't look at uplighting versus downlighting. But it still has some of those concerns, or it still addresses those concerns about trespass and dramatic amounts of uplight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that explains it. I was just wondering if there was just an overall something newer and more exciting that was being planned for the Bluffs area that hadn't been previously planned for.
No, it's your standard uplighting, soft lighting on trees. We do have a little different pool deck area at Parkview. I don't know if you've been out there. There's
I have seen it.
Okay, quite the water feature with
Very
the
nice.
fire and the spa, and so it's really creating soft light to wash over the pool deck. The one thing that is a little different out at Parkview or Jordan Bluffs Phase 1 is there is quite an extensive trail system that goes around the entire project, and so we like the idea of soft uplight on those trees, but also providing some visibility at night in that perimeter trail. I hope that answers your question.
Yep, it does. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Okay, can we get a motion to close the public hearing?
Did we already see if there was anybody else? We did check if there was public comment, right? We didn't have any?
Yes.
Okay. I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Those against? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Is anyone on council ready to make a motion?
I move that we adopt ordinance number 2020-015, amending Title 17 of the Midvale City Municipal Code to modify lighting and signage standards in the JB Subarea 4 zone.
Second.
Any discussion? Rory, can we get a roll call?
Yes. Councilmember Sperry.
Aye.
Glover.
Aye.
Robinson.
Aye.
Brown.
Yes.
And Gettle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the consent agenda. Consider minutes of August 18th, 2020. Do we have a motion?
I motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Rory, can we get a roll call?
Yes. Councilmember Glover.
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
Gettle,
Yes.
and Sperry.
Aye.
Great, thanks.
Okay, moving on to the action items. Let's see. Consider of ordinance number 2020-0-16, approving the vacation of city-owned right-of-way, Park Avenue, Eastville subdivision. Alex?
Yes, thank you. So this, you might recall, is a request that we brought before the city council back in, what was it, May or June? June, it was June. This is for the Jordan Avenue right-of-way that is right next to City Park. If you'll recall from that meeting, this was a right-of-way that we received by plat back in 1918. We got half of it with this Eastvale Edition plat. And as we understand it, the intent was to get the other half when the next plat was done to the west. That never happened. The school district ended up with the property, and we've had this half-width right-of-way for now 100-ish years. Mr. LeBaron is interested in developing his parcels within this subdivision just next to that right-of-way, and submitted this request so that he could use that half-width right-of-way to build a private road to access those parcels. Here you can see kind of those boundaries as they sit today. The school district is on board as well. They own the parcel that makes up the park, as well as a couple over here in the corner. But they don't have any plans to do any development on their pieces. This would just basically transfer the right-of-way for Jordan Avenue and this little alleyway at the south end back to the school district. Nothing else would really change out there. The Planning Commission and the council held public hearings back in May and June. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the vacation request, and the council approved it with a direction to staff to prepare an ordinance to complete the process. We held off on bringing that ordinance back to the council because we were waiting on the final subdivision plat for these parcels to be completed. And that's next on the agenda. So now that we have that done, we have an ordinance here for the council to consider approving to finalize that decision to vacate that right of way. So what that ordinance will do is vacate the sections here that you can see kind of highlighted. It'll take all of Jordan Avenue, all of the remainder of this 12-foot alleyway at the south end, and then a little bit of Park Street up here, and transfer it all to the adjacent property owners here on that east side. The approval that the council gave requires Mr. LeBaron or whoever develops these pieces to fix whatever gets broken as part of this process. So there may be some irrigation lines in here for the park that will need to be fixed. We'll need to get that entranceway up here in the parking lot reconfigured. And then there's some water and sewer line, or there's a sewer line that runs through here, and they'll need to bring water in to service the project. All that will be the responsibility of the developer as those lots are developed. We have all of those also addressed as part of the plat that will be coming up next. So really in this case, we're just looking for approval of that ordinance to vacate the rights of way. Any questions?
Alex, just to clarify for people that may be concerned, we are not giving away any property that is the park.
Correct.
Right.
I'll go back.
I mean, this is already private property. There's just been a right of way that was, what was it, like 100 years old that has never been used.
Mm-hmm.
And we either, I mean, our options are we either have to use it or we have to abandon it, essentially. So.
Yep. So the existing park boundary is the west edge of this right of way where new development will happen. So out there today, if you went out to walk the park, you'd find a fence and some old trees. Where the right of way is going to be turned into a private road is outside of the park portion of that area. So the park will stay as it is. Down here, the school district will get a little bit more property, but it's not going to be turned into a road or developed into anything. It's all going to stay as part of the park, just under the school district's ownership instead of as a dedicated right of way. We'll get 3 more new houses in here that'll basically be on lots the same size as what you see to the east in kind of those older neighborhoods. And those will be reviewed and built probably in the coming months would be my expectation. But yeah, no change to the park. The only change will be on the parking lot where it gets reconfigured to allow a new access through there.
And I still want us to do something about those 2 lots that are in the park, right? That the school district's not gonna quote unquote do anything with, but change that zoning to as unattractive as possible, or find out what the school district's wanting to do, because definitely it will not sit empty forever.
We met with Leon from the school district and discussed modifying our current lease to include those. He was fine with making that addition. So we've prepared a term sheet and we just need to go back to them for approval, but we're working on it and they seem amenable to us doing that.
Okay.
All right, with no further discussion, can we get a motion?
I'll make the motion. I move that we adopt ordinance number 2020-0-16 vacating the Jordan Avenue right-of-way located in the East Vale Addition subdivision.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Rory, can we get a roll call?
Yes, Councilmember Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
No.
Gettle,
Yes.
Perry,
Aye.
and Glover.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rory.
Yes.
Moving on to action item B. Consider final subdivision plat for 4-lot Jefferson Court subdivision located at approximately 320 West Park Street. Alex, you're up again.
Yes, I'm sorry I made your meeting so much longer when I added my 3 items to it. The agenda looked nice and short before I did that.
DIR.
Okay, so this is the final step in front of the council for this project next to the park, the final plat for this Jefferson Court subdivision. So this request also was heard by the council as a preliminary plat back in June and was approved with a set of conditions. Those conditions included things like providing an easement for the existing infrastructure, addressing the comments from the city engineer and the fire marshal, and then a number of other things to do both before the plat gets approved and then also before the plat is recorded. So we've got a final plat here, and it's been reviewed by fire and engineering and planning, and we all believe it's ready for approval. The city engineer did provide some comments on just some very minor technical changes that need to be fixed. And that's something that we can do as part of the Mylar printing and signing process. But otherwise, this plat conforms to all of the requirements of the SF2 zone. We've got that private road from the vacation that we just talked about. We've got all the minimum lot sizes and dimensions and areas met. We're just looking here to get that final approval on the layout. So I've prepared an updated list of conditions that responds to those that have already been addressed and directs the applicant to do a few more things before the plat gets recorded, just to make sure that any of the concerns that were raised as part of both the vacation and the subdivision process are addressed before we kind of lose our opportunity to do them. So here we're recommending the applicant prepare just one more final plat to be reviewed and approved by the city engineer to address those technical details. And then before it gets recorded, provide a streetlight plan for private streetlights, obtain duty to serve letters for water and sewer, which will come from the city engineer when he approves the plat. Correct the garage that's on lot 101, the existing house and garage, and then provide the required street trees, including existing trees if they're in good health, and then fix the irrigation system. As part of this project, the applicant has also provided a road maintenance agreement. Since there is no HOA proposed for this subdivision, we wanted them to provide something that guaranteed that it would be maintained, the road would be maintained, that is. And so we've got that agreement both attached to the staff report and ready to be recorded as alongside the final plat. Again, pretty straightforward, but I'm happy to answer any questions the council might have.
Okay, not hearing any questions. Are we ready for a motion?
Unmute. Okay, here we go. I move that we approve the final subdivision plat for the Jefferson Court subdivision with the following conditions of approval. 1, the applicant shall prepare a revised final subdivision plat to be reviewed and approved by the city engineer, fire marshal, and planning director. Once approved by staff, the applicant shall obtain all required signatures on the final plat Mylar. Prior to recording the final subdivision plat Mylar, the applicant shall A, provide a revised streetlight plan complying with the city's private street light requirements. B, obtain duty to serve letters for water and sewer service from the appropriate providers. C, remove, relocate, or reduce in size the existing garage on lot 101. A building permit is required for this work. D, install or guarantee installation through submission of a bond. 8 street trees along each side of the proposed private street. The required street trees may be clustered or evenly spaced. Existing trees which meet the city's species and location requirements related to street trees may be counted towards this requirement upon inspection and certification of good health by a licensed arborist. E, install or guarantee installation through submission of a bond, any revisions to the park irrigation system and community center parking lot required to accommodate the proposed changes in access and design. And 3, the road maintenance agreement shall be recorded concurrently with the subdivision plat and a copy of the recorded document provided to city staff.
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Rory, can we get a roll call?
Yes, Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Gettle,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Glover,
Aye.
and Robinson.
Aye. Great. Thank you. And moving on to action item C, consider resolution number 2020-R-39, waiving the required notice and declining to provide service to Holmes Homes and Gardner properties on Jordan Bluffs to allow Sandy's Suburban Improvement District to annex the properties into their district. Lisa, you're up.
Thank you. Homes, Jordan Bluffs LC and Gardner Jordan Bluffs LC own properties that are being developed into the Jordan Bluffs condo project. About two-thirds of that project area is located within the Sandy Suburban Improvement District, and the remaining third is within Midvale's wastewater service area. In order for the city to provide wastewater service to the northern third of that property, we would have to have the developer build a lift station, which is expensive to install, but it's very the maintenance high level of maintenance on the city's part to take care of those lift stations, and so it would make sense for that northern third to just be annexed into the Sandy Suburban service area. And in order to do that, we need to prepare or do this resolution by the city. It's anticipated that the two owners, which is Holmes Home and Gardner, will file a petition with the board of Sandy Suburban District and request annexation of that northern third of their property. If they do that, it streamlines the process a little bit and allows the Sandy Suburban District Board to, it alleviates some noticing requirements and things of that nature. The state law requires, it's very process specific. And so this is one step in that the city needs to do a resolution stating that it does not intend to service an area and that it authorizes Sandy Suburban District to not notice it. So it waives the noticing requirement for the city. Since this would be a mutually beneficial option for the city and for the property owners, staff is recommending that council approve this or pass this resolution. And also in the nature of doing this as efficiently as possible, we are asking that the council suspend the rules to pass this resolution.
Okay, we don't have any comments. Can I get a motion?
I move that we suspend the rules and approve resolution 2020 R39 to waive notice under Utah Code annotated 17B-1-406 and decline to provide wastewater service under Utah Code annotated 17B-1-407 to the Holmes Jordan Bluffs LC and Gardner Jordan Bluffs LC properties, petitioning to be annexed into the Sandy Suburban Improvement District.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Roy, can you get a roll call, please?
Yes, Councilmember Gettle,
Yes.
Sperry,
Aye.
Glover,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
and Brown.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to discussion items. Item A, discussion on utility billing delinquent accounts and collection procedures. Kyle.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Let me just share my screen. I have a few slides to go over with you tonight. So I thought what would be good is to initially go over what our current collection procedures are as a refresher, and then look at some historical data on our delinquent accounts. And then also what other agencies have been doing in terms of disconnections and when they started resuming disconnections. So during pre-COVID times, what our normal process is of course, we will bill our customers for their services and fees every month, and we do bill in arrears, so we're billing for the prior month's usage and fees. If the customer's 30 days past due, we do generate what's called a termination of services notice. That's sent, it's typically sent 1 week after the next billing is done. And that gives the resident 10 days to pay, or also contact us. If they are unable to pay, they can contact us and we will work as best as we can to accommodate a payment arrangement. If we do happen to shut an account off for non-payment, we do require payment in full before we restore service, and we weren't doing payment arrangements at that time. The post-COVID shutoffs, what we changed on that was during the process we weren't doing shutoffs. We were continuing to send delinquency notices. We had modified our shutoff notice just to notify our customers that they were delinquent to please contact us if they were unable to pay. We didn't do any shutoffs from March to mid-August. And then in August, when we did do the shutoffs, it was only our higher balance customers. And then what we also did, which was different, was after disconnection, we did allow payment arrangements after shutoff. And then if a customer did call before they were shut off, we were allowing more longer payment arrangement terms. We might stretch out 3 or 4 months. It depends on the circumstances. For our finance clerks, we did have a defined set of criteria. If they weren't able to meet something that would arrange with the customer, our treasurer handled those more complicated payment arrangements. What other utilities have been doing? So starting in May, we saw more utilities start to resume shutoffs. So May was included Draper City. Most of the cities that provide utility services resumed in July. So that includes Rocky Mountain Power, which is a regulated utility. So they have an additional layer they have to go through on shutoffs and getting those approved. It also includes West Jordan, South Salt Lake, and also Murray. The other regulated utility in the valley, Dominion, resumed shutoffs early August, along with Salt Lake City, and then I did put us in that list. The one that I was able to find that is resuming in September is Sandy. What's unique with them, I spoke with their treasurer. They hadn't been sending out delinquent notices during the March to August timeframe, so they elected to send a couple of delinquent notices before beginning shutoffs again. And then there's a few that did not stop, so more of the special service districts such as Granger, Hunter, and Kearns Improvement District didn't stop shutoffs. And includes Water Pro. So you may not know who Water Pro is. They service a portion of the culinary water in Draper City. And then Harriman and Riverton didn't stop shutoffs. Now the fun part for an accountant at least is the data. So I went back to August 2018 and looked at our delinquent accounts moving forward till July. You'll see there's a couple different colors on there. So the dark blue is customers that are 31 to 60 days past due, and this is the dollar amount. The orange is 61 to 90 days past due, and then greater than 90 is in this gray. So as you can see, we normally do trend higher on our delinquencies in the summer, and that's due to summer watering and the amount of bills increase. And they do bottom out usually January, February in the winter months. Since we discontinued shutoffs, you can see our number has been trending higher. And I do have another slide comparing year over year those increases. So overall, between January and May, our delinquency or dollar amount increased 56%. And then what's more concerning from a collection standpoint is the amount of the 90 days past due increased. While it's only $10,000, it is a 40% increase. The longer a bill is outstanding, the more difficult it is to collect. This is the chart I was talking about in the previous slide, where it shows year over year what the delinquency amounts are. So as you can see, it's starting in March through July, the amounts have increased. From July 2019 to July 2020, there was a 62% increase. And then, and I clicked my mouse and look what happens. And then May increased 90% or about $57,000. So the amount that's been due has been increasing. This chart's a little different. This is just looking at strictly the number of accounts. So we switched from looking at a dollar amount to a number of accounts. As you can see, the number's actually been staying, the number of accounts delinquent has been staying relatively stable with the exception of April, but July and June didn't have huge increases. But if you compare that with that prior chart, that means that each delinquent account is owing more money year over year, which also from just a strictly collection standpoint, the higher the amount, the more difficult it might be to collect. And this chart is what I looked at is for a particular account, how many times they were delinquent in a year. So this number at the bottom is the number of times an account has been delinquent. So for example, we've had about 580 accounts that in the past year were delinquent 2 times. Moving down, for example, being delinquent 8 of the 12 months, we have less than 100. So I'm guessing this is probably around 90 to 95. This just gives you an idea of how many chronic late payers we have. And then to give you some ideas of what tools we have available to us to collect on these bills. So our utilities are all considered an unsecured debt, so we aren't able to put a lien on them. We're very unlikely to collect in the event of the bankruptcy. Of course, if we do have a resident that files bankruptcy, We do file with the court to try to collect, but we're considered an unsecured creditor, so we're usually at the very bottom of the creditor list. We do use a collections agency to attempt to collect some of those debts. A good example of when we'll use this is if a customer moves out of their home and for some reason we don't collect enough at title. We do get a title assessment when they move out of the property, or some other unforeseen circumstance comes up. We do turn that over to collections agency. We typically don't turn over active accounts to a collections agency unless there's some extraordinary circumstance that's happening. Another big thing, this changed probably about 10 years ago, if there's a move out or a foreclosure, we cannot charge the new owner for the prior owner's balance. This was a major issue during the last housing crisis in 2008, when a lot of foreclosures were happening. We weren't able to charge the bank back for the prior owner's usage. So that ended up causing a lot of write-offs. And as I'm sure as you know, but just as a reminder, we don't directly bill tenants for utilities. We do make the property owner ultimately responsible for that. The flip side of that is when we don't do shutoffs, we do get a lot of frustrated property owners because we aren't doing shutoffs, and that does require them to collect the balance and keep on top of that. A lot of property owners that rent out their properties do have an arrangement with the tenant that they pay the utilities, even though the bill isn't in their name and the tenant isn't ultimately held responsible for that. Some other things we consider with collections is, of course, as I've mentioned, the more difficult to collect, the higher the balance. And that's naturally because as the balance becomes higher, unfortunately, the resident or the account holder just won't usually have the funds to pay for it. And then the older the debt is, the more difficult it is to collect. One thing with our current collections policies is we have a very low allowance for uncollectible accounts. So we only budget $5,000 for accounts we can't collect. And as you can see, that's less than 0.1% of our overall sales. And then we do in our bonds have debt covenants that have been written into the bonds requiring us to shut off customers if they're more than 60 days past due. The consequence of not adhering to that is we do have to file a disclosure with the bond agency. So we go through the MSRB and we have to file a notice on that. So nobody really knows at this point, since these disclosures have just started happening, what the long-term effects are, but there is the potential that it could affect our credit rating and our costs for future debts. So as I said, nobody really knows what's going to happen because these are just starting, but we could end up with a higher interest rate or more difficulty issuing bonds. And then, as we're going to discuss at the next council meeting, we are looking at refinancing one of our bonds currently. And then that bottom bullet point just barely came out this morning. We were contacted by Salt Lake County. They are setting up an at-risk household water utility payment program to help our residents that are unable to pay their bill. They are still just putting that program together. So at this point, I don't have any details. They wanted from us to get some data on how many accounts are delinquent and what the average balances are. We'll certainly be communicating that more as we get more information and the county rolls that out. So that was really exciting. One of the frustrations with the CARES Act money is I wanted to initially set up a program for our residents where if they had suffered due to COVID-19, we would be able to offer them a grant for their utilities, but the Department of Treasury explicitly prohibits that because they consider it revenue replacement, which is not allowed in the CARES Act. So unfortunately, that was frustrating on my part. So I'm glad the county is putting something together. And then I did just want to, as a wrap up, and of course, I would love your questions or comments. After meeting as a senior staff, we definitely had all I can call it is a communication breakdown with the council. And I'm not going to make excuses for that, but the communication broke down in the chain. The one good thing about that is it's caused us to look at not just how we communicate with you as a council and what we communicate, but we've had a lot of good internal discussions with virtual working, improving our communications within City Hall and with city staff. So while what's happened is not good, at least there is a positive that is coming out of it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. If you have any other comments, I'd love to hear them.
Kyle, I have a question on the water, where the owner is ultimately responsible for the tenant. I completely get that and I agree with it. But is it state law or is it just our ordinance that doesn't have a mechanism where we could bill the tenant and they can pay, and then if they don't pay, the owner is responsible? Do we not have that? And I understand that would add a layer of administration to us.
Right.
But I'm just trying to understand that.
Sure. Maybe I need to clarify a little bit. We will send out a courtesy copy to the tenant so they know that a bill's due. And if that ends up being the arrangement between the landlord and the tenant is getting a copy of the bill. It's just the bill's not in their name and ultimately they're not held responsible. I don't know if that answered your question, or if you do want us to look into more of a.
Well, I don't know that we have to look into it now. I'm just wondering, is that our ordinance or is that state law?
It's not state law, and I would need to check the ordinance, but I believe it's in the ordinance. But I don't want to say it for 100%, even though I read the ordinance last week, and now of course, when you ask the question, I can't remember.
Yeah. I mean, I just look at it and think, if somebody doesn't pay and we have to go to collections to try to get that, obviously having two places to try to get that is better than the one. But is adding that second person worth the extra layer of administration where we're going to have to update a lot of the information about tenants? And so that's what that's just kind of what's on my mind. But we don't have to look into changing the ordinance right now, but
sure,
just have that in mind.
I can tell you from another city I worked at, we did something similar where the property owner was ultimately responsible. However, we would actually bill the tenant and the tenant's name was on the bill. We a lot of times didn't get notification if the tenant was moving out. So we would bill the tenant, the bill would end up forwarding because the tenant had put in a moving request with the USPS, and then the new tenant wasn't getting the bill. But it's, we're always certainly open to looking at things and improving things.
Kyle, I just wanted to say I appreciate the more detailed explanation. I think a few of us may have been frustrated last meeting, not with the decision itself, because we certainly do trust, you guys to make these decisions in our absence. But, it was just kind of that surprise factor that frustrated some of us. So I don't think that even after last meeting, I don't think we were disagreeing much in the ultimate decision that was made, but just the surprise factor. So thank you for that. And I guess it's also a good thing that it's led to some other discussions amongst staff members. So I think that's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to echo that, but just like, I guess bringing back the beginning, that's meaning the utopia too. As long as we know from a council perspective of some of these bigger changes, it makes our lives a lot easier. We can support you easier. We can, move forward with these decisions so we kind of understand, and that obviously not every little thing needs to be discussed, but these are sometimes slightly bigger ones. So, I appreciate it.
No, I completely understand the council's perspective on it.
Also, keep us involved in what's happening with Salt Lake County and what they're going to do with this, so that we can tell our constituents if they ask us.
Right. I have a department report next week, so I will certainly include it if they have the guidance out by then. And of course, I'll be working with Laura once they announce the criteria. But you'll be first to know.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do we have anything else for Kyle? All right, thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to item B, discussion of Irvin County interlocal agreement. Matt, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep it pretty short. We've the current system for us to receive different funding that comes from HUD is that it is passed through the county. The primary types of programs that this includes are the CDBG, or the Community Development Block Grant, the Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG, and then the Home Grant Program. In order for the county to receive those funds, they have to be considered one of these, it's an urban county. They require a certain designation. In order for them to have that designation and receive those funds, they have to enter into interlocal agreements with the communities that they support, which includes Midvale. Now, we currently have 3 interlocal agreements with the county that governs these different funds that we receive. And the county thought that everything was kind of moving smoothly in their certification process to have that urban county designation. But last week they found out from HUD that there were several changes that needed to be made in our interlocal agreements. And so they kind of the county came to us in an emergency type situation, saying that by September 18th, we need to have new interlocal agreements in place. Now, what their plan is to consolidate those 3 interlocal agreements into one agreement, and then make some changes that are required by HUD. Those changes include actually adding language that references the ESG program, which we're lacking in our current agreements, updating the language to reference HUD requirements for home funding. It's particularly having to do with the formula for how those funds are allocated. They want the document to address issues of program income. If we receive funds from the county, for example, and we create a program that generates income, they want to make sure that it's clear that that income has to be either spent on the program or returned to the county. And then the final thing is just clarifying the relationship between recipients of the grant funds, Midvale, and then sub-grant recipients, people that we would provide funding to. And with those 4 changes being the primary ones, and then also whatever changes need to be made to the document by consolidating those 3, that's what we'll be bringing back to you at the next meeting for approval. As of right now, it looks like with those changes, we don't think that there will be any kind of issue, but we actually just received the final version of that agreement and we're reviewing it right now. So in recap, there will be a new interlocal agreement. We'll bring it back to you next week. There are some technical changes that are being made to it. And by approving that, we will be eligible for continuing to receive certain types of funding through the county that are generated by HUD. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Can you repeat all of that?
Yeah, so HUD is the Housing and Urban.
Thanks, Matt.
Like I said, the primary thing is we wanted to give you that quick update so that we don't have to suspend the rules at the next meeting. Okie dokie.
Thanks, Matt.
Motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Before we do the RDA, do we want to take a break? Or do we want to?
IT needs to set up for the closed session.
Okay, so maybe a 5-minute break?
That'd be great.
Cool.
Perfect.
Thanks.
I can go eat some more peanut butter.